In early 2025, former President Donald Trump stepped up to the podium and made a bold statement. Every car sold in America should be built in America. He didn't just speak the words, he acted on them. His administration's tariffs on steel, aluminum, and finished vehicles imported from Canada were meant to send a clear message. Washington was done tolerating cross-border production. But what started as a bold economic strategy is now causing chaos for both Canada and U.S. automakers. The fallout, it's not just about cars. The impact is rippling across industries, manufacturing plants, and most importantly, the workers and consumers who are left holding the bag. Let's dive into the consequences of this strategy and understand how these trade tensions are reshaping North America's automotive landscape. Trump's tariff tactics, a strategic reset gone wrong? When Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian vehicles in 2025 alongside a 50% tariff on Canadian steel, it was supposed to be a strategic reset for American manufacturing. But for U.S. automakers, it felt more like economic whiplash. These companies had spent decades building integrated supply chains across the U.S.-Canada border, one that allowed manufacturers to share the burden of production efficiently. The modern North American car isn't built in a single place. It's assembled across the border, piecing together parts from Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. A piston might start as aluminum mined in Quebec, then be molded in Ontario, finished in Detroit, and installed in Windsor. This process has worked seamlessly for decades, thanks to policies like the 1965 Auto Pact, NAFTA, and the USMCA. The trade war, however, risks breaking this delicate system. A perfect storm for U.S. automakers. Since June 2025, the effects of the tariffs have been hard-hitting. Ford and Stellantis have paused production lines in Ontario due to cost spikes and declining demand. Stellantis's Windsor plant now operates in staggered shifts, and General Motors ramped up truck production in Indiana while scaling back output in Canada.
If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.
These are not isolated moves. Stellantis alone reported a staggering $5 billion in tariff-related losses in just one quarter. Ford's financial figures weren't much better. Meanwhile, Canadian auto parts suppliers who traditionally sent half their output to U.S. plants are watching their order books dry up. But the damage isn't just financial. Labor relations are being affected too. The United Auto Workers, UAW, in Michigan has warned that the ongoing uncertainty might derail plant modernization and recent labor agreements. As automakers shift their focus and try to adapt to the tariff landscape, workers on both sides of the border are feeling the consequences. Canada's response, silent but strategic. Canada, once the biggest supplier of vehicles to the U.S., now faces a dilemma. Trump's tariff threats were a wake-up call for Canada, which had long taken its trade relationship with the U.S. for granted. Now Canada is assessing its vulnerabilities, especially since its auto industry depends heavily on the U.S. market. Trump's tariffs were never meant to target just the auto industry. The Canadian steel sector, which exports 91% of its output to the U.S., has already suffered from the 50% tariff, losing nearly 1,000 jobs. The Canadian Steel Producers Association has warned that if this continues, entire industries could collapse. In response, Canada has been trying to protect itself. The government has imposed quotas on cheap imports from non-free trade agreement countries and now requires domestic steel for federal procurement contracts. But none of these moves have been enough to stabilize the steel sector, which remains in crisis. Canada's quiet retaliation, could it backfire? As President Trump presses for more economic leverage, Canada has kept a relatively low profile. But behind the scenes, Ottawa is preparing to retaliate. Prime Minister Mark Carney has set a July 21st deadline for a resolution. If no trade deal is struck by then, Canada is prepared to impose counter-tariffs on U.S. exports, potentially targeting key sectors like steel, dairy, and aluminum. The problem is, while the U.S. may think it's winning the trade war, If Canada imposes tariffs on American exports, it could hurt Detroit's auto market, which is already reeling. The U.S. risks losing its second-largest foreign market for vehicles. And for what? A temporary political victory that could disrupt years of economic cooperation. The human cost. What about consumers? While politicians argue over tariffs, it's consumers who are feeling the heat. U.S. families are now paying an extra $1,300 a year on average for cars and appliances, thanks to the increased costs driven by tariffs. In Canada, the response has been just as dramatic. Sales of U.S.-made cars have dropped by 30% since April 2025, with dealerships in Ontario and Quebec shifting focus to European and Korean models. Canadians are walking away from U.S. vehicles, not with anger, but with silence, choosing to spend their money elsewhere. And it's not just the auto sector. The uncertainty created by these tariffs is spreading across industries. With supply chains in disarray and companies unable to predict costs, consumers are holding off on big purchases. Some are even delaying car purchases, unsure if the vehicle they buy today will be supported with service and warranties tomorrow. The bigger picture: is this really about trade? As tensions rise, it's clear that the U.S.-Canada trade war isn't just about tariffs and trade deficits. It's about power, leverage, and political strategy. Trump isn't just trying to secure better trade deals. He's testing the boundaries of diplomacy itself. By threatening to absorb Canada into the U.S., Trump is using rhetoric designed to force a response, not just from Canada, but from the entire international community. As Canada holds firm, Trump faces growing pressure on the domestic front. His 90 deals in 90 days campaign is running out of time, and even his once closest ally, Elon Musk, is publicly criticizing his economic policies. What's next for North America? As the July 21st deadline looms, the question remains: what happens next? If Canada caves and adjusts its digital services tax, a new round of negotiations could begin. But if Canada holds firm, Trump might follow through on his threats, imposing tariffs on Canadian steel, aluminum, and dairy.
If you found this video insightful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more updates and content. We've got plenty more coming your way.